When David took on Goliath, boy, did he have it in and say, I'm the one representing God, right? And he was to become the first king of the Promised Land. He was believed to be about a teenager. Young radicals have a very prevalent role in our scripture. That's not to say that elders don't play a prominent role as well. Think about Abraham and Moses, for example. But given the fact that our spiritual leader, that so many of us follow, is believed to be the Son of God, what has happened to get us to the point where churches around the country are filled with many older than Jesus lived in his mortal life, yet those younger than Jesus are rarely to be seen? There are many angles I can take with this. I know, and you know, that there is no single answer. There are many factors involved. Many of these factors are really good in the greater context. And at the end of the day, though, we need to find a way to take care of the institution that last month Mike Miller so eloquently cited in his sermon as model. Young adults challenging the status quo is clearly nothing new, but it's something that is ever present in today's society. The question is our church and the church-going community as a whole seen by my peers as David or Goliath? I would definitely say that this particular church is on the side of David. However, others may not see it that way based on their assumptive conclusions about Christianity. A group of young adult non-Christians surveyed by this group called the Barna Group were asked about their first impressions of Christianity. And it astounds me that, and I'm trying to understand and believe this, that 91% of them cited Christianity. The first thing that came out of their mouths was that this is an anti-homosexual institution. With a first impression like that, how do we overcome such a strong label in spite of our own affirmation for love and equality, which includes the LGBT community? That is a stinging feat to overcome. Yet the answer to our challenge isn't quite simple. And it's not to say that churches have not made the effort to get the community going to be more welcoming for young adults, because they do, and we do. I stumbled upon Adam Copeland's blog in doing reading in preparation for today's sermon. It struck me because there is some truth to the fact that more young adult involvement has the potential to shake things up to a degree that would make things uncomfortable for the older generation as church members. The church I was baptized in was also the church where my grandmother served as the junior rector when she finished seminary. It was also the church that she went home to after she retired from ministry. This church brought in a new rector, and he replaced a traditional organ service with a jazz ensemble. My grandmother, of course, thought it was absolutely wonderful that so many new people were attracted to the church, but the thing is, there was a consequence. The church didn't feel like home for her anymore. The transformation worked to draw a younger crowd, but did push away the established community that was there. On a personal note, my young adult years in church have had a seesaw effect. I have personally grappled with my own issues with faith. I have also felt the struggles of not having a good number of peers to relate to. Something else which is often cited as the reason why my generation has turned away from the church. I was fortunate that I joined a youth group in my teen years that consisted of multiple churches and multiple denominations. The thing is, I was the only one who consistently attended the group from my church. While I made some friends in the group, that issue did catch up with me a bit over time. There were actually 2 adult chaperones from my church at one point too, even though I was the only one going. That's right, more chaperones than youth. But it was no surprise once they eventually dropped out that I was soon to follow. The other churches did have better numbers, but the high schoolers became sparser, and I left the group after my freshman year of high school. When I went to college, there was an Episcopal chapel on campus. In case you didn't know, I grew up as Episcopalian. The university vicar represented the whole campus. She was from the chapel. She did try to offer some programs. We had what was called a Doubting Thomas Cafe to talk about questions of faith, which is a great topic for someone my age. The thing is, I was there many times. I was still the only one who showed up. She held special services because we don't like to wake up in college at 10 in the morning. But still, maybe the most I've ever seen at a service was about a dozen people. So that would be about a dozen out of 15,000 students. And once again, there were more than a few times where I was the only one there other than the vicar and the regular parishioner who was not a student but was really there to offer the music for the service on his guitar. That was one service a month because of the drop-off. Then I started working retail off campus, and eventually I stopped asking to come in late so I could go to church. Although there were a few vague attempts to get back involved in church in between, I could really count the number of times on my hands that I went to church in between the time of my senior year in college, about 2006, and the time I came here in 2008, and when I moved to DC, and eventually came here. The vicar, as I recall, had great reach in the community. Actually, she mentored many students and was well respected and liked in the community. Though her presence in the community was not enough to compel many to come back to a service and actually attend chapel. What do I take from this? For myself, I have found that I do like to be around my peers. If my peers are not around me, it is hard for me to remain engaged in the long term. I have also found that changes in church leadership have had a profound impact on me. While the university vicar was the same, the rector changed at the campus chapel. The rector, who was my mentor in middle school, who brought me into the faith, left my church in my hometown a few years, and I lost a little motivation then too. And yes, even here I felt the departure of a pastor I liked and the slow drift of peers who I had become close with, who had also left the church at the same time. At least I can say I do still keep in touch with some of them. My own perspective, of course, does not tell the entire story. Returning to Adam Copeland's blog post, he wrote about some young pastors he knew. Several of my young adult pastor friends tell me about a time when one of them is hanging out around town, meeting new people, just being his cool, nerdy self when someone finds out he's a pastor. And this person thinks the pastor is pretty hip, so she asks, "Hey, can I come to your church?" The pastor sighs and says, "Yes, but you've got to know, I'm really different at church." These pastor friends, to survive their parishes, have taken the edge off their preaching, their politics, their big ideas, and even their theology. Though the pastors knew young adults are more drawn to their edgy, honest selves, they also know their more established members, with the power in their checkbooks, have other ideas. A lot would need to change for the pastor to be able to respond to his friends saying, "Yes, please come to my church. You'd love it." And if that gal at the bar would truly love it, what would the church's choir members think? Aside from the story that Adam spoke about, and about my grandmother's experience, and the excerpt that I just read, of course, there is another great phenomenon. How about those young people who are going to seminary and not doing so to lead a church? Are they exploring the inner David to take on the institution but in a more passive way? I think of a couple of people I know who have taken on different positions in nonprofits or even staff roles right within their respective denominations to do the actual work, including advocating for people, fighting poverty and injustice on a more direct level. Essentially, they are working around the traditional Sunday morning preaching, and instead, they are going out and doing something about our world's problems. These seminarians are not necessarily looking to defeat Goliath, but if their method becomes the way and the institutional church did actually one day become outdated, then it is really something we must consider. Mind you, I would not want the work of mission to be limited to those in seminary. I know several people who have joined Peace Corps and AmeriCorps. I know several who have gone abroad to teach English. I know many young adults who have worked in great causes both at home and abroad. Yet that doesn't necessarily translate into going to church on a regular basis. Yet they are all following Jesus' lead in many ways. And several of them are very spiritual, though perhaps not particularly religious. I may be the one that in comparison still goes to church more often, but I envy those who do such great work and do the heavy lifting to improve the world. I should not discount myself, as I can say I've done my own little part, my own little way. I can say this though, we are a generation that likes to walk the walk. Something else to pick out from Matt Copeland's blog is the evidence from his writing. Something I know to also be true from my personal interactions is that young Christians generally are liberal Christians. We have our edge, as he puts it. The question is, how can we cultivate that edge so that we can bring harmony to a community that includes a young woman at the bar, the choir member, my grandmother, and myself? It is possible. Perhaps we just have to think and reflect on just how Jesus was able to calm the wind and the sea. The wind will continue to blow, and the sea will continue to flow. But can we find that calm here when we come in? Absolutely. Just think about the young souls at All Souls down the road. They had a far smaller group when I went there a while back to one of their events well over a year ago, maybe 2 years ago. And I have to admit, they kind of had more people at their brunch a couple weeks ago than we probably had here on our entire service. It goes to show, though, that good leaders committed to their spiritual journey and focus can make things happen. I assure you, we cannot do it by just throwing out any old idea. It will just fly out into the wind. But if we open our ears and open our minds to our community, the wind will stop and the sea will calm. Perhaps then we will not see each other as David and Goliath, but rather as our peers, one person to another.